Hey gang, Doug here at Iron Village. So today's article, we're dealing with back pain or back discomfort. I'm going to show you 4 exercises or movements here that should hopefully help with that. Active mobility drills, some strengthening drills, activation drills, call them what you want. But just movements that will help kind of strengthen up the glutes a little bit. A lot of times when people have back pain, it's muscles or structures above or below that joint, in this case low back area, that are possibly causing that issue. So a lot of us sit in that poor posture all day in our car, at our desk, at our tables when we eat. So we kind of get the short and tight hip flexor, the lower cross syndrome issue going on, weak, inactive glutes. And having, being short and tight here will kind of pull that pelvis out of position. So I'm going to exaggerate, obviously, but if these are short, you can kind of see what that did. Kind of got my butt back a little bit, but put me in a very anterior tilt position. Glutes are off. So if we can strengthen these as well. If we just stretch, that's not necessarily going to fix the problem. You see people stretch their hip flexors and their quads all day long, but yet, oddly enough, they're probably still dealing with some issues. So strengthening doesn't mean shorten. That's something that some people get confused with. So if we can strengthen here, activate back here, strengthen here as well. A lot of times people are just weak in the core, their abdominal structures, those muscles that support and stabilize the spine are weak. So if we can strengthen the low back, strengthen the anterior core, hopefully that will help. So here are the 4 exercises. I'll get right into it. The first one is going to be off the total gym, and the other 3 we'll use the piece. So this first one is an active mobility drill. And what I mean by active, I'm going to say active probably too many times, but what I mean by active is we're not passively stretching anything in any of our movements. So this hip drill here, where we're going to kind of actively move through the movement. So I'm trying to keep my knees apart and stay tall and feel the range of motion. I'm trying to challenge how far and what sort of range I can get. My hips, my disclaimer is I've got some labral tear issues going on in my hips, so my range of motion is pretty limited, but I can still show you the movement. So we're in this 90-90. That's going to refer to the angles of the knee. So I've got one leg coming straight out here, and I've got the 90 degree at the knee. The other leg I need to fix a little bit. We've got the 90 degree here coming straight off the side. So I'm in this relatively, again, pardon my, I do as I say, not as I do, relatively tall posture here through the spine. So I'm in this 90-90 position facing this way. My goal is to get in this position, but just face in the opposite direction. Okay, so I'm going to sit up as tall as I can. I'm going to lead with the side knee. So this knee, I'm going to drive it over as far as I can very actively. I'm going to try to sit up tall. And when I hit that limit, when I can't push it any further, then I'll start to bring the rest of the body over. And the whole time I'm trying to drive these knees apart and keep them apart. Alrighty, so if I sit up tall, I'm going to open this knee as wide as it'll go, and then there, I'm locked up, and I'll start to bring the rest of my body, but I'm continually driving my knees apart. Okay, and then boom, here I am, 90-90, facing the opposite direction. Same thing to go back. This knee, side knee, open it up as wide as it'll go. Okay, keep driving the knees apart, and then boom, back down. So over and back would be 1 rep, okay? A great movement to help open up the hips, internal, external rotation the entire time, both ways. Okay, so that's number 1. Number 2, we're gonna get into a hip flexor stretch, which is a pretty popular stretch. And I'll show you a couple little nuances here. So this hip flexor stretch where you put your foot up on a wall or on a bench, your couch, your bed at home, and just kind of people do this sort of thing here. They lean into it. I feel some stretch here. I'm getting probably more into the capsule than necessarily into any musculature, but this feels good, kind of leaning into it. Instead of just that lean in and just kind of hang out here passively, I want to stay a little more active. So I'm going to stay a little bit more upright, okay? And then I'm going to work on this anterior tilt of the pelvis, okay? So what I want to try to do is level that out. So if right now, if you look at my pelvis as a bucket of water, I'm spilling that bucket forward. So I want to think about activating my glutes and trying to tuck my butt underneath me. It's kind of hard to see, okay? And I want to, now I'm more neutral. I want to try to hold that throughout. Once I've got that neutral position, and I should note, just doing that, I feel more of a stretch in my hip flexor. So here, if I'm just here, kind of lean in a bit forward, but stay nice and tall, I feel a little bit of a stretch. As soon as I do that butt tuck, we'll call it, tuck my butt underneath. That intensifies that stretch. So much more intense here, so I feel I'm getting a little bit more benefit here. And now once I'm in this neutral position, you can lean forward a little bit, but again, I'm just not leaning forward here, okay? I'm staying tall and leaning the whole body forward a little bit. You can also utilize the total gym. So this angle will help. Moving this back a little bit is gonna help as well. But again, I don't wanna go back too far where I don't wanna go back too far where I lose that neutral position, okay? So again, I can tuck the butt, pull it back a little bit, but I'm staying as neutral as I can, and it's so much more intense. If I let that go, I can go all the way back here. That doesn't feel any more intense of a stretch. Tuck, stay neutral, and that's about as far as I get now, okay? So obviously you do both sides, and again, you can kind of play around with that movement here. You don't have to move much, because again, I don't want you to fall out of that proper positioning. Third one, sorry, we got two more to go. Superman position. Now this is a little bit more of an aggressive movement, might not be for everyone, it's depending on the level of pain and discomfort you're dealing with, but once you're on the mend, so to speak, we do want to activate that anterior core. And I don't mean crunches and planks and things. I want active, and I want you to work on resisting movement. So especially this extension movement here. So this extension pattern. This can be done on the knees, it can be done standing. I'll show on the knees today. But the Superman here, so I'm here, again with the pelvis. I don't want to be arching just like the hip flexor we just did. As I fall forward kind of into that Superman flying position, I'm very, very strong through the midsection, and then I'm pulling myself back. Think of pulling yourself back from the abs and hips. It's not an arm movement, regardless if I'm on my knees or if I'm standing. I don't want to just fall out, just move my arms back and forth. I want my arms kind of more along for the ride. So I'm bringing my hips, I'm bringing my abs forward. I'll show this one from the standing. So everything's falling. Now I feel the abs engaged. That's good. I don't have to go any further. And I'm going to pull myself back from here as opposed to just driving myself back with the arms. You kind of have to do it to feel it, and once you do feel it, though, you'll understand and appreciate the difference. Again, this might not be, if you're chronic then and dealing with a lot of pain, then this might not be for you. But once you're, like I said, toward the latter end of any sort of pain and discomfort and you're looking for some relief, this is much more proactive. You can strengthen that midsection, hopefully help or prevent some pain coming down the road. So that's the strengthening one. The second, so our first two are more mobility drills, if you will, the 90-90, the hip flexor stretch. These second two are more activation or strengthening. So we're working on the front side here with this with the Superman, and the last one is just a glute bridge. There's a million variations. There's two kind of options you could do here. You could have your back on the total gym. You could have your back on the floor here. I'll show it on the floor. Play around and see if you feel some different activation going on. I'm just gonna get hamstrings, strengthen the low back, really gonna focus on the glutes. I have this, you could definitely add this. If I put this on, I'm not going right now, but put it on around the legs, just below the knees. Anytime you do any bridging patterns, adding the little cuffs here, the bands, focus on driving those knees out. You'll get a little bit more abduction into the hip, which will even help activate the glutes a little bit further. But for right now, this is going to be fine. So I'm going to lay down here, butt near the end of the board, heels on the board, feet flat, heels on the board. I'm just going to lift the board off, take the board off a little bit. Okay, so we've got a little bit of an unstable surface. As I drive up into a hip extension or glute bridge, we've activated hamstrings, glutes, so I can just stand here. But if we go into repetitions, I want to keep my feet flat, but I'm really, especially for focusing on glute activation, I'm focusing on driving through the heels a little bit more, okay? And focus on that squeeze. So I'm going up, squeeze, then release. Up, squeeze, and then release for your repetitions there. That one's pretty straightforward, but a great one that you can do. Again, you could do it, show real quick. If I lay here on the bench, same thing. Glute bridge, okay, squeezing, and again, you could add those cuffs for even a little bit more activation. So there's your 4 movements. We've got 2 more mobility drills, and then those 2 activation drills. If you do those consistently in your routine, part of your warm-up, throughout the workout, wherever you want to get them in, as long as you're doing them consistently, you'll get some results.